and today, I will be bringing you a horror story, titled Very Scary True, Paranormal Call Caught on 911 Recording. But before we get into the story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and like this video so that I am motivated to upload horror stories every day. And this story, it started like any other night in the small town of Rock Hollow, Missouri. At 2:41 a.m. on a cold February morning, the county's 911 operator, Megan Ellis, received a call she would never forget. The voice on the other end was that of a panicked woman, frightened, whispering, and barely coherent. It started with a phone call, just one of thousands that came through the emergency line every week. But this one, on a freezing February night, didn't sound like a typical break-in or domestic dispute. There was something off from the very beginning. The breathing on the other end was shallow, erratic. Then came the whispering. Not frantic, not panicked, just trembling. She said there was someone in her walls. Her name was Alyssa Grant. 34 years old, mother of one, living in a quiet neighborhood just outside Rock Hollow. Her house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac lined with barren trees and pale street lamps that flickered like tired eyes. Her husband was out of town on business. Her toddler daughter, asleep in her crib, had been fussy all evening. Alyssa had put her down early, made herself a cup of tea, and curled up on the couch with the baby monitor buzzing quietly beside her. That's when the noises started. At first, it was just a faint tapping. Something that might have passed for a branch scraping the siding in the wind. Then it became more deliberate. Rhythmic. A series of soft drags and scratches, moving along the living room wall. Too slow to be a rat, too methodical to be the house settling. She turned off the TV to listen closer. Then the whispering began. But not from inside the room. From inside the wall. She froze, every hair on her body rising. The voice didn't sound fully human. It was low, rasping, and too close. It seemed to move along the drywall, like it was slithering through the wooden frame of the house. She couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely speaking. And whatever it was, it knew her name. That's when she called 911. While the dispatcher tried to keep her calm, Alyssa walked from room to room, pressing her ear against the walls, trying to locate the voice. It followed her. At times, it stopped and let her think maybe, just maybe, it was all in her head. Then it would start again, louder, closer, more malicious. The whispers didn't stay whispers. They became breaths. Then growls. Then silence. The baby monitor crackled. She felt it, like static in the air. A pressure. That kind of heaviness that presses into your chest before a thunderstorm, except there was no storm. Just that unbearable stillness. The tea on her table had gone cold. The hallway light flickered once and went out. Then her voice dropped on the line. She went completely still. There was a pause that lasted too long. Dead air. Then, just before the call cut off, she whispered something chilling. And then, silence. When the officers arrived 10 minutes later, the house was locked from the inside. No forced entry. No lights on except for the dull blue glow of the baby monitor, barely visible through the living room window. They knocked several times, no answer. They called out her name, announced themselves. Still nothing. Then they heard it. That sound, that scraping. Long, slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across a chalkboard, but muffled through drywall. It moved along the ceiling, paused, then began again along the floor. One officer later said it felt like it was circling them, like it knew they were outside, and it was playing with them. And then came the voice. From inside the house, through the thin walls and thick air, they heard a man whispering, "Help me!" over and over again. But each time, the voice changed slightly. Like it was trying to imitate different people, different victims. The tone would shift from a child's voice to a middle-aged man, then to something that didn't sound human at all. They kicked the door in. The house smelled wrong. Not rot, not gas, but something that clung to your clothes, like rust and old breath. The walls were ice cold to the touch, despite the heater still running. Furniture untouched. Nothing broken. But everything felt disturbed, like something had walked through and just rearranged the air. They found Alyssa in the nursery. The nursery was silent. Too silent. No crying, no rustling of sheets, no creak of floorboards. Just the mechanical hum of the baby monitor sitting on the dresser, glowing green with a single, steady light. It should have been comforting. But in that room, it felt like a warning. Alyssa Grant was found curled into herself on the floor, her arms wrapped tight around her legs, her back pressed against the cold drywall. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. They didn't dart around or follow movement. They stared straight ahead, at the wall. She didn't respond to her name. Didn't flinch when the officers approached her. They said she looked like someone who had been emptied out. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted like she just finished screaming and never inhaled again. Her daughter somehow was unharmed, still sleeping peacefully in her crib. That crib, white with pink bedding, stood untouched in the far corner. A stuffed bear tucked under the child's arm. In the footage later reviewed, that part never changed. The child slept through everything. Even that. At first, the responding officers assumed it was a mental health emergency. Psychotic break. Temporary dissociation. Nothing more. But protocol demanded they secure any digital devices in the home. For body cams, forensics, and in this case, a baby monitor. It was one of those newer models, night vision, audio sensitive, Wi-Fi enabled. It had been recording everything in that room. The officers handed the SD card over to investigators without a second thought. No one expected to find anything significant. But what was on that footage changed everything. They loaded the files the next morning at the station. The files started with static. A grainy, gray-toned view of the nursery. The infrared mode was active, everything bathed in that eerie, pale green glow. The baby was asleep in the crib. The mobile above her swayed gently, though no window was open and the room was still. Then, the timestamp caught their attention. The recording started 7 minutes before the 911 call had come in. The camera was pointed at the crib, but the built-in microphone captured sounds from the hallway just outside. Footsteps. Soft ones. Pacing. Back and forth. Hesitant. Then the sound of breathing, shaky, strained. Alyssa, moving up and down the hall. You could hear her mumbling, although it was too faint to make out the words. Then she stopped. A shadow passed over the camera lens, just a flicker, like someone moved in front of the doorframe. That's when the sound came through. Not a thud. Not a knock. A voice. Male. Low. Clear. I know your name, Alyssa. The entire room seemed to change with those 5 words. Even watching the footage, investigators later said they felt it. Like a shift in temperature. A pressure in the chest. A presence. The mobile stopped moving. The green lights on the monitor flickered. And then came the shape. Infrared doesn't lie. It detects temperature. Contrast. Life. The room glowed softly with the warmth of the sleeping child, the faint heat of the electronics. But behind the wall, inside the wall, there was something else. A humanoid form. Faint, but unmistakable. Arms. Legs. Head. Shoulders hunched. Compressed into the narrow space between the drywall and studs. Its heat signature was subtle, like it wasn't alive in the same way people were, but it was there. It moved. Crawled upward behind the nursery wall like a spider, slowly and deliberately, until it was directly behind where Alyssa would eventually collapse on the floor. And then it vanished. The shape didn't walk out. It didn't retreat. It just faded, as if it had never existed. But the readings showed something. A spike. Not hot. Not cold. Just wrong. They reviewed the footage over and over. Called in analysts, IT specialists, forensic audio teams. Everyone had an opinion, but no one had an answer. Some said it was a compression artifact, a rendering error in the video codec. Others suggested light distortion. A few believed it was an elaborate fake, though the device had no signs of tampering, and the footage had never been uploaded or edited. But others, they weren't so quick to dismiss it. One retired tech from a nearby paranormal investigations unit, who was brought in quietly, said the shape didn't behave like a glitch. He described it as a cold echo, something he'd only seen once before, in a different case. He wouldn't elaborate. Then the footage leaked. No one knows who did it. One morning, it just showed up online, posted to an obscure forum for analog horror enthusiasts. The file was raw. No title. No watermark. No context. But it went viral within hours. Comments poured in. Thousands of them. Some said it was obviously fake. An ARG, a stunt. But many others said it felt too real. Too quiet. Too precise. That it hit something deep in the brain that recognized predator. People enhanced the audio. Cleaned up the infrared scan. Some even claimed to see faces in the wall. Multiple ones, appearing for brief frames, just long enough to be missed by the naked eye. The story exploded. News outlets picked it up. True crime channels. Paranormal podcasts. Alyssa's name was everywhere. She was dubbed the woman who saw what's inside the walls. Some called her crazy. Others called her cursed. But no one could explain the shape. Or the voice. That voice still haunts investigators. Not because of what it said, but because of what it knew. It didn't ask her name. It didn't guess. It said it with certainty. Like it had always known. Like it had been watching. Waiting. And this was the first time it had decided to speak. After the footage leaked, Alyssa was transferred to a private psychiatric facility. Not for security, but for protection. Her husband withdrew from the media entirely. Her child was placed with relatives. The case should have ended there. The house sealed, the footage archived, Alyssa institutionalized. Everyone involved was advised to move on. But Megan Ellis, the dispatcher who took the 911 call, couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone unnoticed. Something in Alyssa's voice. The way it dropped mid-sentence. That whisper at the end, just before the line went dead. It crawled into her thoughts in quiet moments, when the house was dark and her shift was over. That gnawing itch that something wasn't right. 2 days later, after most of the buzz had died down at the precinct, she logged into the call archive from her workstation. It was just after 2 a.m., the overnight lull, when the world felt hollow and thin. She cued the recording and hit play. The familiar static buzzed through her headset. The dispatcher script echoed back, her own voice asking Alyssa if she was safe, if she could see anyone. Then Alyssa's trembling reply. And right around the 20-second mark came the part Megan remembered too well. He likes when you're scared. She expected silence after that. That's how it had been when she first heard it live. But this time, there was something else. A voice. Low. Deep. Not just quiet, but wrong. Like it wasn't coming from inside the phone line, but from behind it. From inside the recording itself. She's mine now. 3 words. Whispered slowly. Almost tender. But it hit Megan like a cold blade between the ribs. Her stomach dropped. She tore the headset off so fast it hit the desk. For a full minute, she just sat there, frozen, staring at the audio file timeline on screen. The waveform had spiked, clear and undeniable, exactly at the 23-second mark. It hadn't been there before. She rechecked the timestamp. Nothing in the system had changed. No edits, no glitches. The file metadata was clean. The recording hadn't been altered. It had simply changed. She pulled a backup copy from the system's cold storage. A separate file saved the night of the incident, identical, untouched. Same voice. Same words. Same unnatural pause afterward. And then she noticed something worse. The waveform of the voice. It didn't look like a voice at all. It wasn't smooth, fluid, or curved like human speech. It was jagged, asymmetric, like it had been sliced together from broken sounds, almost like something had tried to build a voice from scratch. She reported it immediately. The file was flagged, pulled from the system, and shipped off to the FBI's forensic audio lab in Quantico. Megan had hoped they'd explain it away. Call it a prank, a bleed from a nearby frequency, a rogue signal. Anything. But what they found only deepened the nightmare. The voice didn't fall within any known human vocal range. It dipped below what a human throat was capable of producing. The software couldn't auto-transcribe it. The sound signature had no matching audio profile in any national or international database. And it wasn't even a consistent tone. It flickered, jumped frequencies mid-word. Like it wasn't bound by breath or lungs. Like it had been stitched together from scraps of noise, just enough to form words and twist meaning. The lead technician wrote in the report that the voice lacks the qualities of a biological source. But that wasn't the part that disturbed Megan most. It was what followed. A handwritten note left in the margin of the internal case file, likely never meant to be seen by the public. Whatever said this wasn't using a voice. It was imitating the idea of one. That was the last straw for Megan. She resigned that same week, citing psychological trauma, but refusing to elaborate. She left her apartment in the city and moved in with her sister 3 states away. She's never given an interview, never spoken about the case again. But one thing is known, she stopped using phones entirely, even landlines. She won't speak to anyone unless it's face-to-face. As for Alyssa Grant, her condition never improved. Doctors diagnosed her with catatonic schizophrenia, but the label felt hollow. She'd never shown symptoms before. No history. No warning signs. One night she was fine, functional, warm, laughing with her daughter. The next, she was gone. Like her mind had cracked open and something had crawled in. For weeks, she didn't speak. Not a single word. She'd sit silently during evaluations, unmoving, her eyes vacant. Then, one morning, during a routine session, the hospital's on-site psychiatrist asked a simple question. No provocation. No threat. And Alyssa spoke. Just one sentence. He said you'll hear him too, eventually. She said it calmly. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. Just as a fact. Inevitable. Like she was describing the weather. She never spoke again after that. The recording of her sentence, just like the 911 call, was archived. No edits. No processing. But when investigators tried to analyze her voice for inflection or stress, the results came back strange. There was a faint distortion layered beneath her words. A kind of echo that didn't follow normal acoustic patterns. It wasn't feedback. It wasn't an equipment malfunction. It sounded like something was repeating her words, a fraction of a second after she said them. Mimicking. Following. The same 3-second delay every time. Eventually, the files were sealed. Locked in a private server under restricted access. Not because of national security, but because no one could explain them, and no one wanted to listen to them again. The case was officially closed. But there are rumors, among night shift dispatchers, audio techs, and junior agents who've heard whispers about the Alyssa Grant file. They say if you listen to the original 911 tape in complete silence, with the volume all the way up, you can hear more than the voice. You can hear something breathing behind it.